And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Bubba and the Bloom, episode 77. Going to recap some of our lessons learned from 2023 and take a dive into the Draft Champions, Overall Champions draft to see what went right, what went wrong, maybe things to grab out of that for potential 2024 Draft Champions draft, as those are already going strong over at the NFBC. But before we do that, some housekeeping. I am on Twitter at BDentric, the podcast at Bubba Bloom Pod, and my co-host, as always, on Twitter at RyanBHQ. Ryan Bloomfield, how are we doing, my friend?
We're doing good. It's been a refreshing week, like for me at least. It feels good to not sweat anything. The discourse on social media has been very positive. Everyone's celebrating their wins and that sort of thing, which is like we said last week, but Sunday night, Monday morning when the podcast dropped, now's the time to do it. So it feels good to celebrate, not sweat anything. And I guess tonight we will humble ourselves a little bit. We'll bring ourselves back down to earth after victory lapping and celebrating Sunday night.
Yeah, we'll talk some lessons learned, but it won't be your typical lessons learned. It won't be like, hey, what did you learn with the stolen bases? Or it's more like, how can we become better fantasy players? But
yeah, like things we did wrong or things we wish we could have done.
Yeah, different ways to
at least say we'll do next year. But
exactly,
maybe
I feel like some of these we talked about last year on the same show, and we're back at it again. But we'll see how that goes. And like I said, we'll recap the 2023 DC Overall Champions draft, which is an interesting takeaway to say the least. But it should be fun as we get going. We're going to start. We were brainstorming behind the scenes on what we want to start doing coming up. If we want to start recaps, what we want to do. So you got some fun stuff coming your guys' way if you stick with us through the off season, which I think you will. So and it is official. Well, not official, I guess, till it happens. But after First Pitch Arizona, we hinted at we will start coming up with twice a week for you. So you'll get plenty of Bubba in the Bloom where you probably won't even want to tolerate us anymore. But hey, give you something to listen to fantasy baseball wise. And if you have any questions, keep them coming all off season. We'll help you out. If it's something you have about 2023 or for 2024, bring it on. It's the best I can say. Lastly, FPAS is less than a month away. That's all I'm going to say. We've talked about it enough. If you're not signed up yet, I don't know what you're waiting for, but FPAS is less than a month away.
4 weeks from tonight, I will have just enjoyed my free round of golf, courtesy of you, and we'll be somewhere. We'll probably be at Scottsdale Stadium or back at the bar or whatever. But yeah, 4 weeks away, man. I just absolutely cannot wait. I changed my flight, so I was flying in Thursday morning, like 6 a.m. out of Portland, and giving myself like 2 hours before the golf outing. But now we're coming in Wednesday night, so stoked to be able to kind of chill out Wednesday night, get a full night of sleep, and then hit the links on Thursday. So cannot wait, man.
It's going to be great. Going to be awesome. I haven't even looked at the weather yet. Praying there's no rain. That's all I'm going to say. That was hopefully a once-time situation, but we'll see how that one goes. Let's get into it. Let's talk lessons learned here. Or do you have any? Hey, that sounds fun. Do you have any playoff takeaways as we saw 4 sweeps? Anything?
Yeah, that's a good. We haven't talked any playoff. Disappointed in. No, we did. Yeah, we went through our brackets and picked everything. I'm glad you brought that up. Like our Brewers kind of didn't do anything. I know the Woodruff injury was bad, but they got smoked.
Yeah, D-backs
got smoked big time.
There. Yeah. Brewers failed big time. Rays failed big time. Philadelphia.
Yeah, I would say, like, I don't know. My personal take on the playoffs is we overreact so much to this stuff. It's to me, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe you disagree, these playoff series are such a coin flip. I hear things like the Brewers, the Brewers need to shake things up. They lost 2 games, man. The Brewers have won 3 of the last 6 NL Central titles. Like I don't know. There's a lot of overreaction, and that's the nature of the playoffs. But like, I just think of this thing as like, how many times did the Rays, for as great as they were this year, how many times did they lose back-to-back games during the regular season? Like they could have lost 2 in a row in June, and nobody. I mean, yes, it's a different environment. I get it, but I don't know. It's a coin flip. Enjoy it for what it is, the postseason. But I don't really like if your team consistently gets there. I think you just kind of, I don't want to sound like Jerry Dipoto at this point with the 54% quote, which was a little cringe. But if you can consistently get to the playoffs and get into that coin flip tournament, I think that's about all you can do. After that point, it's up in the air. I don't know. You may disagree, but that's kind of how I feel about the postseason.
No, like some people are saying they need to have 4-game series. I'm like, you just can't. You can't leave these other teams on bye weeks that long. You can't do all this other traveling. Like, it's just, this is the best case scenario if you want to get more teams into the dance, which is what they want. This is what you can do. This is pretty much your only option, and that's just the brass tacks behind it all. I think it's fun. It's just a rare thing. We saw all these sweeps, which you usually see a couple, but not this many. So it's a bummer. But, like, the Twins, they finally got through. And in the past, the Twins teams, I don't think were that bad. They kept losing. They just lost. Like you said, it's just kind of a thing. They got it done this time. The Jose Barrios thing, we could leave for a whole nother show, but that weird. But the Twins got it done. It was cool to see the D-backs do it, as much as I love the Brewers, and I thought they had a great chance at that pitching staff. D-backs are fun, and they're lined up to get Gallen and Kelly in the first 2 games against the Dodgers. So we'll see how that one plays out. That should be fun. You got the Astros coming in. You got the Orioles, the best team in the American League, getting to host some games. And that Philadelphia Phillies environment, like, I almost tweeted it out, but I mentioned to you the other day that, like, I need to go to a night game in Blacksburg. Philadelphia playoff games coming right up towards the top of that list as well. That is an electric factory in there.
That's funny.
Jamie Moyer,
because
it's a college
Jamie
football.
Moyer
Moyer the
it's
first.
like a
It's a call
thing.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
You see Jamie Moyer throwing out the first pitch in those like
in overalls or whatever he was.
It's like those milk bibs like the Big Ten teams wear. It was nuts. I saw some tweet that some fan in a section was partying so much he bought the entire section beer. The tab was $4,500. It's just it's insane. I would love every minute of it.
Which is also like, I don't mind the expanded playoffs. Like, I think if you're a wild card team or even a division winner like the Twins, like, if you want the bye, play better. These wild card games, like I said, they're toss-ups, but it just gives more teams the ability to do it, and you get atmospheres like what we saw in Minnesota and what we saw in Philly, and those were absolutely electric. So looking forward to that. Look, the Philly Atlanta series is going to be electric.
Fireworks.
Absolutely electric. So.
Because Atlanta, I'm not going to get into things they do at the stadium because that's polarizing, but that place gets raucous during the playoffs. So that place will be loud. Plus the rivalry. And then when they go back to Philly for games 3 and 4, oh boy, especially if Philly's got a lead in that thing, that's going to get wild for sure. Baltimore, I'm looking forward to, because those people can get spunky when they need to. And it's their first time they've really had a team like this in a long time. So I'm kind of curious to see what they put forth in that situation. You got the Astros as well, which we know how that goes. But the one I'm really curious about, because it could either be just a complete dud or you never know, it could get interesting, is that D-backs Dodgers series. It just doesn't, out of like all the 4 series we're going to see, it seems kind of like the dud of the group. But the D-backs, man, they got these young players and they got a couple decent pitchers. Like, if they can go and steal like game 1, that could be fun. That could be a lot of fun because they'd have Gallen going in game 2. So I love playoff baseball, but I'm also a baseball diehard. So
for me, it's nice, and it's nice to just be able to, like, I have no rooting interest, so it's pretty sweet to be able to just watch baseball and not like be on edge. So
I'm rooting for 7 teams. I'm rooting for 7 teams. It's very, very simple. I could care less about one.
I can tell which one you're not rooting for. But.
Yeah. But just for fun, who do you think wins it all?
I'll still go the Braves.
I think it's the winner of the Braves Philly series. I hope it's one of those 2 teams, whoever wins, against the Orioles. That's what I want to see.
The most bittersweet thing would be the Phillies winning behind like Aaron Nola shoving.
And he shoved
from a fantasy standpoint, he did, and it was like, oh man,
him and Eovaldi on the same day.
Eovaldi was up. He was up 2 miles an hour. I thought, I don't know, bet on the Diamondbacks. I bet against Texas. I thought Eovaldi was toast, but he was up 2 miles an hour and looked pretty damn good. So
yeah, it'll be fun. We'll talk more about it next week because we'll be at least halfway through the NLDS, if not maybe through some of them, depending on they start on Saturday. So we might get towards the end of some of them if there's sweeps going involved. so we can kind of talk about where things are at that point in time. But it's a fun time of the year. Enjoy it while you can, because pretty soon we won't have any. So there is that. But let's talk lessons learned. This is always a fun kind of looking back moment of what could we do better? What did we just do wrong? Period. What are ways we can be better fantasy players in general? So I guess I'm on top of the list. I get to go first tonight. We each have 4 lessons learned. So let's just have fun with it. Mine, it's just kind of a carryover from last season, which I thought I did more of this year, but I still need to be better at it. And that is to continue to be more aggressive in fab, like be willing to drop guys, be willing to go get your guys, but also do it in a way that has money left over for the final weeks, not just like a couple bucks. Like I had $2 to $4 in a lot of leagues, but you want that hammer that last week that could make a difference in not playing Jordan Wicks against the Brewers and maybe going and getting like Olsen of Detroit or something. Something along those lines could make a big difference in those final weeks that can take you over the top. And so I want to keep being like, especially in 12s, that's a big difference. 12 compared to 15s. You got to be able to drop guys. You got to be able to do what you got to do to keep, the best lineup in play, as much as that makes too much sense, but you understand what I'm saying. But I still need to be able to do it without overspending all the time and having funds left over at the end. So that's one of my lessons learned that I need to continue to get better at. And there's ways to get better at it that I talked about earlier today that'll help, hopefully help me down the road. But I need to actually do it, which takes time, which, I have so much of.
Well, it's tough because I understand what you're saying. It's a goal. You want to be more aggressive in fab and you want to have money left to spend, but it kind of goes against each other. Yeah, exactly. So it's you got to kind of know when to pick your spots and where
maybe
to do
being
it,
more judicious with my funds in fab, like still being aggressive with my drops, but like not overspending so much. So being better at like analyzing my league is a better way to say it. Maybe
that makes sense. That makes sense.
Something along those lines. That because like when there's so many times when you're going like 12 to 2. Those $10 each week just add up in the end. Like that's a lot of cash when all things are said and done. If you could just even make it 6 to 2 or something, that's just a huge difference. Like I think that's more what I'm referring to is still be aggressive in like trying to fill your needs, getting rid of dead weight on your rosters, but doing it in a way that leaves you with funds in the end of the season.
That makes sense. And when I say pick your spots, it's like, when do you attack the Tanner Bybee versus when do you or are you overbidding $40 on a streamer versus when you should be spending 10 or 15? I think the latter, like for me at least, is when I say like try and conserve that money to be available at the end. That's what I need to get a little bit better at, is those like not the high end guys, but more the streamers. It's $10, $20 too many times. 10, 15 weeks.
Yeah, I will do my best not to say this too many times, but when I talked to Drew Forte on today's Bench with Bubba, he opened my eyes.
Name dropping already. You're going big time. I like it.
He opened my eyes to what you just said, because it's something I didn't do enough of, about when to spend and when not to spend. And those streamers are things that I get caught up spending too much in. And he's like, dude, if you have 5 streamers, make your waterfall, be okay with the third guy on the list. They are streamers for a reason. Like, don't overspend, just overspend, knowing you're going to drop them in a couple of weeks. So then why'd you spend so much? Like, it's that philosophy that I have not fully taken in. And that it's like when he started like leveling out all these things, I'm like, oh, that makes way too much sense now. Like way too much sense looking back. Now, will I be diligent enough to do it next year? Who knows? But it made a lot of sense when he said that. So that would help me save money for the end.
That makes sense. My number one lesson learned, and this is maybe because it's fresh in my mind, I've mentioned this a couple of times down the stretch, is just like using my time better, controlling what I can control. I typically spend way too much time checking live standings, looking at MLB game day, and like not sweating over things, but just like monitoring things that are outside of my control, as opposed to I can spend it because we all have finite time. I mean, both of us were full-time jobs. We do content. We have families to do and that sort of thing. Like, instead of taking the time to watch where I'm at in the standings, which is somewhat important, but not to the degree that I've been doing it, spend that time something more constructive in terms of like fab, basically. I always, like, during the season, I always think during the week, I'm like, oh, fab's not till Sunday. I can kind of put that off until Friday, Saturday, that sort of thing. And then Friday, Saturday comes, we're doing things on the weekend, and it just doesn't hit. So, like, I need to think of a way, just process-wise, to be able to take away the time that I'm doing following my team, which again does have some value, because you do want to keep tabs on, like, and this will fall into some of my later lessons learned. You want to keep tabs on obviously how you're doing in the standings and how your individual players are doing, and that sort of thing. But from a time management aspect, just focus more on the things from a fantasy standpoint that you can control versus the things that you can't.
I do like that one. That is a big one, especially the maybe work on fab throughout the week thing. That's not a bad idea.
It's tough, because, like, I always think to myself, I can do it. It's Wednesday night or whatever. I've written my articles and whatever. But in the back of my head, I'm like, so much is going to change by Sunday night. Yeah. But what can I do Wednesday night to at least make that fab process a little bit easier over the weekend? Haven't figured it out yet, but it's just something I need to work.
Like, I know some guys will put in, like, if they know there's a player they like, they put like $1 bid in just to remind them, like, hey, use these guys later on type thing. I think one thing along those lines that would be something, I know it's not my lesson learned, it's yours, but focusing, like, using the middle of the week to focus more on maybe the schedule for the next week. That would, like, highlight certain things to make fab easier instead of Saturday night or Sunday. Like, start digging in on, like, you write that article, which helps you look at that a ton. But just kind of having an idea earlier, like, hey, these guys are going to really stand out, or this team we really want to focus on. So then, I know there's sometimes in certain leagues, maybe not just NFBC, but other leagues, they're like, hey, we want to target like the Giants and Coors. And you're like, oh, you go through some of the fab and, okay, these are the guys. And then you realize somebody else got picked up because he didn't go like page 2 of the players. Like little things like that, where you could have got a guy for $1. That's just my thought process, because I'm with you on the overall planning better type situation for sure.
Yep.
All right. My second lesson learned, and this, I said we wouldn't talk about, the stolen base environment, but the way I want to say this, I want to attack steals early again, because it's something I do, but I need to do it with not forgetting power. I know last year I said I wanted power a lot, and I did better at that. I did a lot better. I beat a lot of Pete Alonso's, not enough Matt Olson's, but like I made a point to do that. But I think one thing is, with the change in the stolen base environment, doesn't mean we can be completely neglectful of stolen bases at this, because you still need the elite guys. But I think I want to still get my guys early that can give me 20, 30 steals, because then it can allow me so much more flexibility to go get a Jorge Soler, or go get someone later in a draft that I can take the empty stolen bases with power from an outfielder, like a Marcelo Zuna, who came out of nowhere, things along those lines, Jesus Sanchez's of the world, where we know we're not going to get a ton of steals, but could get a ton of power. I need to be cognizant of that, but I not go crazy, because I had so many steals this year. I was winning steals by so many. You can only win them by 1, folks. You don't need to win them by 100. So it's just like there's a point where it's dead stolen bases, and in a no trade league like the NFBC, that becomes a tough roster spot. And that got to a point where it was just like, wow, they're still my best players, so I'm playing them, but there's a point where, should I just drop them and just stream power? Like, it got to that point where it was tricky. So I got to be more mindful of still attack it, but don't forget power throughout the draft type thing.
I remember in our draft and hold that we did this time last year, the early DC, my terrible team that, well, it wasn't terrible, it finished 4th, but my team that had Acuna and only had like 20 hitting points. You just reminded me of this. I had Acuna, Miles Straw, and Esteury Ruiz. Like,
all the steals, all of them,
all the steals, but like it doesn't matter. I mean, I was benching. Obviously, I'm benching Miles Straw, but I benched Esteury Ruiz for a lot of the year because it didn't. And again, in non-trading, like a trading league, it would have been great, give him up, but in a draft champion, like I wasn't even starting him, and it was just way too much. And so that's also like, I don't know, going off a little bit, but like that's why I tend to never draft those all in one basket stolen base guys, because even if they do hit, there's a decent chance if they steal 70, there's a decent chance 30, 35 of those mean nothing in your standings because you're so far ahead. Kind of like what you were saying, Bubba, where in standings it just doesn't matter.
Like I'm curious. The early DC, we started the first 7 rounds. I took Acuna, Lindor, and I think Ozuna or Rosarena with my first 3 outfielders. On paper, about 100 steals, give or take. So then I should be able to be like, I took a Josh Young late. I don't expect a lot of steals from Josh Young, but there's a power source that it allowed me to do something like that without having to go get steals. I think that's my mindset. We'll see where it goes, but it's that kind of philosophy in my mind. But we'll see.
Yep, makes sense.
What's your next one?
What do I got? Oh man, this one. So I need to be more proactive and not just rest on my laurels when I think so many things can change throughout the season. I'll draw an example of this on my I go back to labor a lot, but my labor team, I had Emmanuel Clase and Carlos Estevez. And for most of the season, I'm thinking to myself, and it was true, it's like, I'm good. I don't need to even look at fab. I don't even need to look at closers for fab or saves or whatever, because I'm good there. I don't need any more. And I think that's a mistake. And that's just one example for like saves, but the same could be with, depth for starting pitching. Just because what you currently have for that week in your starting lineup looks good doesn't mean you need to always be searching for that next plan B. Because you never know when Carlos Estevez is going to blow up in August or September, and all of a sudden you don't have closers, you have one, and you need to suddenly backfill that. Happened the same thing with me in tout words. I had Devin Williams and Craig Kimbrell, who I did pick up on fab, but look great as the Phillies closer for some time, and I was like, I've got 2 closers, I'm good. I think one of the things I need to think about is just even if my starting lineup looks good in a particular category or a particular position, doesn't mean I need to keep looking at my bench and keep trying to improve my bench, even though if I might not use them that week, to keep kind of improving those aspects. So one of the things I typically do is go through every time I look at my drops. Who are my drops? I look through my starting lineup. And I think, I'm good there. I don't need to backfill that. But to be proactive and kind of take a speculative third closer when I already have 2 or 3 throughout the season, that's going to help me, because at some point you're no longer going to be good in that category or that position. And so that's one of the traps that I always fall into. And so I need to be better at that. It bit me a couple times in a couple spots this year. And so need to look at that constantly.
Yeah, I think we're all guilty of that at some point in time, especially like the part you mentioned about on the fab, on the waiver wire. It's like look to improve your team even if you don't think you need them right now. That's something
exactly.
I know the Guilds has mentioned that so many times, and it was a lesson that he taught Curlin this year in his main event deal, because Curlin was trying to wrap around his fab, and I can't remember which one of the rookies got called up, and Curlin was like, I just don't need him right now. It was when Guilds was adding Taj Bradley everywhere, and at the time it looked like a great move and just didn't work out. But Guilds also had a loaded pitching staff, so Curlin was like, what are you doing? Like, why are you wasting money on this? And that at that time we didn't know how many prospects were getting called up. Like this could have been one of like the 3 guys for all we knew in the season. And Guilds made the point you're talking about is, I'm improving my team now for the rest of the season because I don't know, like, why not improve them? Why let someone else improve their team while I can, type situation. There's a lot to that. There's also, like, when you're spending that kind of fad dollars, it's a different story. You're probably talking like, hey, go spend a few dollars to improve spots.
Yeah, I'm not saying like go all out on something. Like if there's, you need to go triple digits on somebody because it's a position of need. Yeah, but like it's just, I don't know. It's exactly what you were just talking about. If you think you're good, the key is like right now. That's the key word. Is this week you may be fine, but 2 weeks from now you might not be. So just to keep looking.
6 months is a long time for things to go off the rails. And so you need to find many ways to it's like the old you guys might hate me for dad jokes and comments like this, but it's like the old like cartoon back in the day where you just see like, the guys on the train and it's running out of coal and they have to keep reloading the coal, otherwise the train stops. Just think of it that way. It's a weird analogy of the situation, but just roll with it.
It's going back, man. That's
not many of that are probably listening even know what I'm talking about, but those are like
I actually have a I live in a 100-year-old house and I'm in the basement. And
so to
my left, I have a coal furnace.
There you go.
It's no longer in use, but it
Thank
has
God.
its own
Thank
chimney,
God.
and there's exactly for my kids' sake.
But
there's like a little place where you can shovel in the coal, and I don't know. I haven't opened that door yet. I'm sure there's a dead rat.
Don't open that for your own good. Go get an N95 before you do that. But yeah, like I got friends that have those wood burning stoves in the middle of their living rooms at some houses. So it's just like, whoa, what are we doing here? But that's the idea. Like you got to keep filling it up to keep it working, type thing, and keep loading up your team. I know people probably turned it off the show by now, but that's just something that clicked in my head. My third lesson learned is continuing to improve on starting pitcher player pool depth. Like we spent a lot of time analyzing the different pools. Like I've said it many times, some of my favorite episodes last year in draft prep was when we went through like picks 1 to 150, 150 to 200. It helps you learn the player pool and then the depth of the player pool. But what I want to learn more is, as we saw, we've always noticed it, and I'll use Sporer and Scott White's term, the glob that we've talked about, is like there's like the elite pitchers, and there's so many that feel like they're similar, and you wouldn't be shocked if a few took the next step, but at worst, you think there's pretty decent floors in certain places. I want a better knowledge of that pool to add depth during my draft, if that makes sense. Instead of, taking one or two really good pitchers and then just kind of throwing, not darts, because I'm not saying we don't do the research and the work on it, but having a better idea that in picks like 20 through 30 in a draft, I can keep adding depth to my pitching staff of guys that might actually turn out to be really good, because there is a lot of talent back there. But you get to that point in the draft, and that's where like we start taking chances on certain players or certain bats or whatever. I'd rather take a chance on at least starting pitching. With bats, I'm still cool taking chances back there because whatever happens, happens. But pitching with innings going down so much, I think just quality innings, quality depth is so much even crazier important than it was in the past. So that's something I've noticed, especially like looking at people's drafts that have won and looking at some leagues I did well in and some leagues I didn't do well in. Those later pitchers that you still are using towards the end of the season, common sense obviously helped, but the fact that you could get them helped. And there's a lot of them there. There's more pitchers there than hitters there that you can confidently like go, yeah, I could see them being like a part of the team. So I want to do better, even deeper diving kind of on the back end pitching and seeing where I can go with that. And you can't predict injuries by any means, but kind of set yourself up. Aaron Savali's, Dane Dunning was probably a free agent. We talked about him last week, but just like dudes that are born that can be very Justin Steele, like Nady Eovaldi was late. There's a bunch of dudes that I think could be interesting options. Like, but Savali was one of your boys, and you got me on him, you got Drew on him. That was one of your Bloom Board dudes. And I think knowing those kind of guys is even more important to me next year to kind of make that kind of base. So then you don't have to worry about spending hundreds of dollars on prospect pitchers, stuff like that.
I think one of the more common terms, and it's been thrown around a little bit this year, last couple of years, I think it'll rise to more prominence this draft season, is streaming starters from your bench. I think that's a fine strategy, is taking 11, 12 starters in your draft. I did this a little bit in labor and tout this season, where like I filled out, your first 23 rounds, you think conventional wisdom, you need to fill out your starting team. You don't. Like, you can just go all pitcher from like rounds 22 to 26 and build up that starting pitcher depth, which I think makes a ton of sense, because we sound like a broken record, but like every week this season, we were trying to pick starting pitcher streamers. There were only like a handful of weeks out of 26 where we actually felt good about our picks. And like the more we can do to avoid that, I think the better, in terms of like your full healthier team overall. So that makes a ton of sense, is just building that starting pitcher depth, because you're going to need it. You're absolutely going to need it. And the replacement level for starters is just so freaking bad that you're better off having a few extra starters and streaming your hitters off the wire than your pitchers.
And you can get hitters for like $2, like, and make it work compared to, because the other thing is if a good pitcher actually comes up, you're gonna have to pay for him. That's the other problem. Yep. So it's just it goes back to my first lesson learned. Like, how can I be smarter with my fab dollars to have money at the end? Well, maybe having better pitchers on my staff to begin with is a great way to go about it, type scenario.
It would be interesting, to run an analysis of fab this season, looking at like the under $40 hitters versus the under $40 starting pitchers, great from like a streaming standpoint, and see how they did. Probably write a note, but I don't have a thing.
I'll write a note for you. But
it just seemed like every week you could get, like you were just saying, you could get a couple cheap hitter streamers and it would work with the schedule. But pitchers, like, it was just death. And that was the same as last season.
If you're listening, Rob McCabe, you are the fab chart man. This is all you, buddy.
We will corner him at first pitch maybe and make him.
I just
see if he can do something.
Yeah, I just think dominating the pitching market more. Again, can't predict injuries. If you get injuries, it is what it is. But if you can dominate, and then if you the depth, the injuries don't hurt as much. That's another thing. If that's an option on draft day or even the first few weeks of the season, like adding guys early that didn't get drafted, that kind of thing before chaos unfolds, I think it'll allow things to go a lot better during the regular season. Is the best way I can say it. So that's one for me.
And it kind of builds on my lesson learned. It almost more like observation was just the teams that it was early starting pitchers, the teams where I picked. So, I mean, I'll be totally transparent here that the top 3 starting pitchers that I was highest on versus the market were Brandon Woodruff, Aaron Nola, and Kevin Gossman. One out of those 3 really hit. And it's just fascinating to see of those teams where I drafted Gossman and not Nola and or Woodruff, how well those teams did compared to the Nola. The Woodruff and to a lesser extent Nola. I keep kind of bagging Nola, but he wasn't too bad. Whereas like Woodruff, wasn't
hurt for so long
and is hurt again. So,
yeah.
I don't know what the actual lesson learned is there because like I go back to my labor draft when I took Nola. The next few starters were like Cease, Scherzer, Sandy. Like it wasn't. I don't know. It may have just been a bad year for early starters. Like, so I don't. I wonder if the lesson learned, is the lesson learned to just not go early starter? Then you really need to back that up with volume in the middle rounds. What we're kind of just talking about with starting pitchers, or is there something in my player evaluation process that's wrong? I would say with Woodruff, I would say no, it wasn't. He just got hurt, and that was rough. Am I missing something with Aaron Nola? Maybe. Did I miss anything with Gossman? No. So is it just kind of like a luck of the draw? Like I didn't pick the right starting pitcher, or is it? Do I need to avoid that cohort and instead kind of load up on bats early? And then go maybe the rounds 5 through 9 or whatever, and just load up on depth to what you were just saying with your last lesson learned of starting pitching. It's something once kind of ADP shake out, and once the player pool shakes out for 2024, I'll look a little bit deeper at. But that's something I'm weighing is like, do I really need to go that early with an early starting pitcher? But again, if it hits like with Gossman, it definitely works.
Yeah, like I know one strategy that's already in my mind, and no, I'm not drafting real leagues yet, except the one DC we're doing. But like in a fab league, maybe in an on the wire $50 one or something, I want to try doing like my first 7-8 rounds just hitters, and then just going like 7 or 8 rounds straight starting pitchers / relievers, and
call the old Ray Flowers around here.
Yeah, that's how we used to draft back in the day. Like before things got crazy, you didn't take starting pitchers early, and I'm just curious, like. Outside of the aces, which I'm just not as usually inclined. I will, but I'm not as inclined to get like those 7 or 8 bats if they hit, or 6 of the 8 bats hit. Like the talent level at the top is just tremendous. I guess it's in my mind. It seems interesting. Will it play out on paper is a whole other story, but it seems like it could be very with what's fresh that took place in 2023. It feels pretty interesting for 2024.
That'd be fascinating. It's something I think about for labor next year, because that's one of the first like live fab leagues that drafts in February. I think we're doing something like that too. I don't know if I'd go that extreme. Like I think if you're going to do that, I think you still need to get like a closer early.
Yeah, you can squeeze one in like in round 6 or 7 or something. I'm fine with that if you want.
But it would be very, you're right. It'd be very interesting to see what 5 or 6 bats and then like 9 starting pitchers.
Of like just like so you're not getting like the 4s and 5s in a rotation, but you're getting a bunch of like 2s and 3s. So that like if they're on, they take the step to ace. so you're not like that far off the ace pedestal. It's just a flaw. Like, I don't know. It seems interesting.
And then the back half of your hitting probably sucks, but you're streaming that anyway. So
exactly, because if you picked 7 or 8 hitters, well, it's almost your starting lineup. And if they don't get hurt, they're probably starting all season for you if you play it right. And so like that's the philosophy behind it. And if you go heavy pitching in the middle, even if a couple don't pan out, you still hopefully have 4 or 5 that are pretty good.
Yep.
And that like carry. So I don't know. It's just like I don't know. It could be a total dumb idea. It really could.
It makes a ton of sense. A lot of it depends like what the ADP looks like and that sort of thing. But in theory, that I don't know. I've been kind of thinking about that too.
Well, and like labor and tout, or if you're in a Yahoo league or an ESPN and you can trade, I think it's even more viable personally.
Yeah.
You go get some elite hitters and then flip one of your top bats for like an ace or 2 later on in the season or something. Like you could do all kinds of fun stuff there. Like that's a whole nother game. So definitely something to think about. All right. My final and fourth lesson learned is apparently I need to learn about prospects because we're not prospect guys here, but wow. Like
you might be bearing the lead with this one. This is a good one.
Yeah. As I said, I need to apparently learn more about potential call-ups because this is a real thing. We've kind of talked about it before. I know I've talked about it with the Welsh on other shows and whatnot. He's a prospect guy, so I trust what he has to say. This is going to stay. I don't know to the extent of this, but we're going to see more and more young players called up for 2 reasons. The Rookie of the Year thing gets you draft picks, yada, yada. They want to, especially pitchers, they want to use the arms and the bigs as much as they can because pretty much everyone's having surgery now. They finally realize, like, hey, a 20-year-old Yuri Perez, let's use him in the bigs instead of AA. Like, this makes sense. Things we've been screaming forever, like they're finally doing it. And also getting guys up. Go with the Tampa Bay Rays method or the Braves, and you get these guys up. If they're good, you try to, throw them a 6-year deal for like $80 million or something, $70 million. Try to make it a team-friendly deal, but it gets them, buys out their arbitration, and everyone's happy, and you can build a team longer type stuff. So there's 2 sides of it. There's the financial side, and there's just like, let's just use these guys while we can. So I think it's going to happen a lot more. And there were so many times last year you get the call up, and I literally would tweet out, hey, James Anderson, Welsh, Chris Clay, Garrett Cross, what do I need to know? Like, I have no clue. Yep. What are we doing here? Is it worth my FAB dollars? Is it not? Some guys were, some guys aren't. That'll be the same next year, no matter how good you think a guy is. Guys that transition to the bigs, it's just different. But it'd be nice to know. Like especially for draft champions, that's the big part. Like, hey, do I need to go roster by roster and see what guys for adding single A and double A right now I can get around 48 that might come up next year? Like, who's next year's Matt McClain? Who's next year's, like, so on and so forth. Go down the list. We talked about it last week. We'll talk about it more in the coming weeks. Like Tanner Bybee, all these dudes that came late. Who are these dudes that can be tremendous later in the year that I never even cared to know about because it never really mattered a ton outside of a couple of random examples. But you're going to see more and more. And the one thing that I will say, what seemed to happen more often than not this year, not everywhere, like I'd have to really sit down and look at it, it seemed like it was either teams out of contention or cheap teams that did most of this. The Reds, the Guardians, the Marlins, most of them, not all, but most they're cheap teams. And that goes back to my financial part of this. And I think that might be an angle. Now, the Dodgers are the exception, but they also had no pitchers. They had to. Like they did. I don't think they planned on bringing all these guys up in LA. They had to. There was really no options at a point in time. The Giants, they were out of it, and they were getting injured everywhere. They had to bring guys up. There's certain teams that it felt like they kind of did. Other teams, cheap teams, that just let's go. So I don't know, but I do need to learn more about these players because I think we're going to see this early, often, and just all the time now.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that because and talking to the people who know, like the Welsh, is one of the things I was thinking about. Is this just a one-off thing? Because we've never seen this before, and even last year we were under the rules of the same CBA we are this year. Excuse me, and we didn't quite see it. But so I do wonder if this is a one-off or if it's here to stay. And if it is here to stay, like, yeah, that's a totally new. To what you were just saying, that's a totally new like angle of analysis that we needed to do. And like the prevailing thought for me, at least, has been get playing time, rack up at bats, and like to a certain point that makes sense. And there's still a very tight correlation with total at-bats and how you do in the hitting side. But we do need to open up and kind of look at prospects and who's coming and who's skilled, because if it is here to stay, that's going to be huge. I do wonder too, like, if that's going to affect the back half of even redrafts next year. And went into your show, which was fantastic, by the way, with Drew on Bench with Bubba. He made the really great point. He brought up the Andrew Benintendi example. You do not want to Andrew Benintendi. Yeah. You do not want to Benintendi at the end. You want what you want in your back half of your, maybe back third of your draft. Yeah. You do not want Andrew Benintendi. You want that binary prospect, high upside ceiling guy, whatever, where you don't feel bad cutting him. We're like, Benintendi, he's going to play every day. He's going to get a homer or a steal. That was the example that Drew mentioned. It's like not a tough cut, but it's like you just tend to hang on to that type of guy, where if you go with a prospect or a spec closer, it's an easy cut and you're churning that roster spot anyway. And so I do wonder in the back third of draft if we're going to see teams be more aggressive in terms of just taking shots on prospects. And if it doesn't work out, you just drop them, and you're going to drop that spot anyway and see what you do with your ad.
Yeah, it's like we keep joking that we're not going to start going crazy in the drafts, but I want to see some ADP already. Like, I want to see what the impact of 2023 is already going to start doing in 2024. I'm really curious to see how it plays out.
I mean, we'll find out soon enough. We are starting our draft champions. We're continuing our too early meatball, whatever we call it, that Rob DiPietro is commissioning for us. We're starting the 8th round tomorrow. I have the first pick. I do wonder, when we're going to see, honestly, some guys I've not heard of or don't know much about. It may be like in those first 20 rounds where some of these prospects are going. Like, I've obviously heard of Wyatt Langford. I know what he's all about, but like, where is Wyatt Langford going to go? Those types of things are going to be fascinating to see in this draft season.
Yep, 100%.
All right. Last but not least, God, this is a perennial, and I don't know if there's a right answer with this. You're kind of boring, set and forget guys. For me, it's very tough. I plug in for this year. For me, it was Yasmani Grandal, who's my second catcher. I draft him kind of late, middle rounds, whatever. Think, he's playing every day. He's not playing well, but eventually he will pick up. Never did. For me, it's learning these middle round hitters, really. The lesson learned for me is to be more aggressive with those drops. Gene Segura was another example this season where, like, you kind of drafted Gene Segura for volume. You see someone who's going to play every day, chip in some homers, some bags. It was very apparent by like May that he was doing absolutely nothing. Gene Segura his monthly batting average 217, 211, 173 through the first 3 months. Like, how long did you just look at your roster every week when you're looking at drops? You see Gene Segura, middle infield, and say, he's fine. I'll keep him in there. Next week, there he is again. He's fine. Maybe a little bit slow start. I'll keep him in there. It's those types of guys that I need to be more aggressive on, those kind of mid-round. I'm not saying for your best hitters, even your like top 10 round guys, like, give it time for the numbers to catch up. But it's more like the round 15 hitter that's just kind of solid, you think, and boring, and a veteran who racks up at bats. I need to be a little bit more aggressive in dropping those guys, because there's oftentimes a real chance where they just don't do anything, and they're on your lineup for like 20 weeks, and it's 20 weeks of death. And the 20 weeks of death award for me this year was Yasmani Grandal as my second catcher. He was in a lot of my lineups until like August, and it was just like, good God, I missed out on Yainer Diaz. I missed it. This kind of goes back to resting, what I was saying earlier about resting on your laurels, not being proactive. This is kind of that. I looked at Yasmani Grandal. He's playing every day. I don't need a second catcher. It's like, I did. Definitely did.
Yeah, Tim Anderson is my example for that one.
That's probably the king of it this year. Yeah,
that's the guy that I thought you were going to go with when you started talking about players. Like, and it wasn't just you. There was a lot of people you saw all over Twitter. When do I drop him? When do I do this? Like, what do I do? He was the tough one for many. And if you go with the philosophy of all the hitters earlier than pitchers, you might not have to worry about it. So that's something else to think about. Don't around set it and forget it. It's kind of nice, but yeah, we've all fallen into that. It's like the Benintendi example you get. Like you draft him and you're like, oh, he's gonna get me 2020. Okay, Nolan Jones got you 2020 in 100 games. Like there's guys that you can pick up that can change things, and it's just a tricky situation that you got to be willing to just kind of pull the pin at times. It's never easy, which is you have to be able to, and something I think I talked about like on last year's lessons learned or something, you have to be able to be okay living with mistakes. You have to be knowing that you're not going to get them all right. Like some of these are going to backfire tremendously. Like I wanted to drop Sean Murphy early in the season when he was platooning because he wasn't playing well. Well, Travis d'Arnaud got hurt. Sean Murphy started playing great. It worked out. But then when d'Arnaud came back and Murphy sucked, I dropped him for Bo Naylor, and it worked out freaking great. That could have backfired if Travis d'Arnaud got hurt again. Like that's just one of those. But you got to eventually just pull the pin and cross your fingers at times. And it's tough. I get it. It's very tough. I'm with you there.
Tricky is the right word because like we're pointing out examples of guys who just never turned it around mid-season, but sometimes they do. Yep. Like Jose Abreu this year. Blake Snell was dropped. CJ Abrams was dropped. I mean, that's not the set and forget it type guy, a little bit different example, but like there are times where it comes back to haunt you. And so that's what I mean. Like it's never a cut and dry kind of thing. Like you said, it's tricky when to pull that trigger and when not to. But I don't know. And there's just like, I don't know, so many guys where I just leave in there way too long. And it's like, this guy's burned me for the last month and I don't even know he was struggling this bad.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's a tough one. It's tough. Not sure it'll ever get easier, but it's definitely one you either just got to start just treat it like fantasy football and say, hey, he's got to go. We can't wait for you any longer. Or you got to at least bench him for a bit, but then now he's taking up a bench spot where you can stream someone. So it's tough. It's very, very tough. But all right, let's talk 2023 Draft Champions, overall champion, Michael Stryker, drafted on March 13th. These were his 50 picks, round by round. And it's up on the YouTube if you're watching it. Ryan put it up there very nicely. And we're just going to kind of go over like what we talk about different spots of the draft and winning the draft here, doing things here. How did he put his team together, I guess? So what stands out to you, Bloomfield, that when you look at this setup here?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of dovetails. This, I guess, is the equivalent to a Bloomboard portion of the episode, but it kind of dovetails to those lessons learned of like not just learning our mistakes, but learning from people that know what they're doing. And so, again, your interview with Drew is fantastic, and learning from that is great. I don't know if we know Michael Stryker, but he, I don't personally, or through Twitter or whatever. But
the only striker I know goes by the real name Scott Jenstead.
That's right. It may be him in disguise.
Maybe.
There have been other disguised folks high up. So anyway, we figured we would draft these top 50 or look at the top 50 picks just because like on a draft and hold, you can't really do much in season. So this is the team that he had and doesn't make for good podcasting just to say every single pick that he had. But the biggest takeaway, and again, for the YouTube crowd, we kind of bolded the good picks, the quote unquote good picks that we think relative to draft slot that were here. For me, it's interesting that last year's Draft Champions winner just nailed like the last 10 rounds. There were just guys, I forget the exact examples, but a bunch of guys rounds 40 through 50 that came out of nowhere and won it. This is a little bit of a different build. The first 7 picks with Michael's team here. He was drafting 6, and Bubba said March 13th. Kyle Tucker, Spencer Strider, Emmanuel Clase. So he had one of the best pitchers. He had the saves leader, had a debatable 30-30 guy. I don't know if the Kyle Tucker scoring decision is final or not, but basically went 30-30, then Strider, then Clase, Corbin Carroll, Will Smith, Wander Franco, George Kirby. Like, I can't think of a much better top 7 picks than that. And so that was one of the big takeaways is he just did not miss at all in these first 7 picks.
Yeah, he dominated the start of the draft for sure. And then it got dicey. a bit. It worked out really well. But he took the Jordan Walker hype train in round 8. The next really strong stuff that we saw, and again, this is like Drew Rasmussen was awesome, and he got hurt. Nothing you can do about that. Like Jonathan India turned out well. I think getting Kota Singa in round 13 was big. Obviously, it's common, like duh,
Yeah.
but that was good. You highlighted Alex Lang and JD Martinez had a huge season, so those guys came out very strong. But like you said, we're not going to go pick by pick. Some of the things that stood out to me though, Ryan, is like I told you off air, like the catcher's position, for instance. It's one when you talk about like draft champion strategy, people are like, oh, I'll get 2 good ones early, or make sure you get like 3 pretty good ones, or like they all have like different philosophies. Leave with 4, whatever. He takes Will Smith in round 5. Then he waits till round 29 to get Luis Campusano, who was good when he played, but he was hurt throughout the season. Jorge Alfaro, who couldn't stay on a major league roster, and Austin Barnes in round 48. Those were his 4 catchers. So essentially, he had like 1.5 catchers this year, is the way I would say it, and he still took it down. So I guess moral of the story is don't worry about catcher if you have one elite guy. I don't know, maybe
You're hurting your brand. Kind of bagging catchers here a little bit.
Hey, this isn't my style,
makes sense.
but he won all the money and I didn't. So
did a similar thing with closers. So I mentioned Class A at the top. Went elite with Class A, went elite with Will Smith. But the closer strategy here was to take, Class A in the 3rd, then Alex Lang, which obviously worked out. I think did he get 30 saves? It was in the 20s. And then Trevor May, which is kind of like it depends when you started Trevor May, like when you had him in your lineup, but had over 20 saves. And so Striker's team was able to finish quite well in saves with a 3rd round, 14th round, and 22nd round, which is kind of the blueprint of what I would like to do in a lot of drafts, is to take, given the way the closer market is, to take that, I don't want to say sure thing, but take that early closer and then a couple specs. In this case, he happened to nail those couple of specs.
Yeah, the Scott McGuff, while he was doing well, went well. Like you said, when did you use him type stuff. Yeah,
the infamous. Remember the Tout Wars live stream when McGuff got taken? Yes. I had never heard of the damn guy. Jesus.
Yep, it was a wild one. I guess like some of the other things, because he nailed the early rounds like we talked about, but then he did take advantage of some like later picks with multi-position stuff we talk about in DCs a lot. Like Brandon Drury still had over 20 home runs, and that's got all kinds of flexibility. I believe Spencer Steer has multiple positions. Obviously, Spencer Steer was great. Kyle Farmer, a ton of flexibility, who we've talked about a lot, especially towards the end of the season. Kevin Biggio actually played well to finish the season. He had flexibility. So they might not have been like quote-unquote elite plays, but in a 15-team DC, even a 12-team 50s, like that is the kind of guys you're looking for that have a little bit of extra oomph when you're drafting. I think that had to help him a lot because for the most part, like you said, he nailed the early draft. His 6th round pick obviously missed plenty of time, and we might not see him ever again. But a lot of his early picks, even if you go through like round 10, part of 15, most of the bats stayed healthy throughout the season. So that helped him a ton. Like health, we always talk about it's a 6-month season. There's got to be some luck factor involved. Well, he got lucky in the health department. So I'll say his elite players stayed very, very healthy this season.
Yeah, and to get an overall, you need a mix of both. You need a good, good skill, good evals, and health. One interesting trend, like on the back half of this draft, there weren't many like breakout guys. There was Cole Reagans in the 40th, which helps.
Good pick.
Which certainly helps. There's Jaron Duran 42nd, which also helps a lot, and Nolan Jones 45th. Those were the 3 big guys at the end of the draft that really kind of tucked us away for him. But outside of that, like the back half of this draft, there weren't other breakout guys, but there are guys, Bubba, like you said, that multi-position kind of filled holes where you needed. I know there were weeks where Matt Vierling, who was a 34th round pick, there were weeks where Matt Vierling was very useful, very useful. The Tigers had a few 7-game weeks and that sort of thing where it was useful. Tyrone Taylor, when he played, was very useful. So, and obviously Kyle Farmer when he played. So there were some like kind of, I feel like this is a team where in season he probably managed it very well in terms of like picking and choosing the right spots to deploy Vierling, to deploy Farmer, Tyrone Taylor, that sort of thing. because there's a lot of those types of guys. Which as a takeaway for me in Draft Champions is like to just, again, stay vigilant on those biweekly lineups. And I know we probably have too many Draft Champions teams by the end of draft season, but to be able to kind of grind those midweek lineups, that's probably what Michael did a lot here with some of these names.
Yeah, looking at the roster, I'd love to know where he was in like August overall wise, because a lot of these names in like the second half of the draft, they really came on in like the last 2 months of the season.
Yeah, before Reagan's
like even like the Taylors, the Bigios, the Veerlings, all those guys that were productive for the squad, a lot of them came through in the second, like the late half of the season or so. So I'm curious to see where he stood there. And then, his starting pitching staff, honestly, you got Spencer Strider, George Kirby, two just elite ratio guys are out the gate. Rasmussen, when healthy, was awesome, but then it went to Bradish, outstanding this season. Mitch Keller, very, very good. You mentioned Cole Reagans for like the second half of the season. So when he needed like his overall starting pitching, like even before Cole Reagans, the first half of the season, if not most of the season, it was Strider and Kirby and Senga and Kyle Bradish just never left his rotation. Maybe even Mitch Keller. So that's a ton just to like sit there. He could have just started Strider, Kirby, Senga, May, Keller, Lang, Clase, and then just filled in like that's 7 pitchers right there. Like he just had a couple spots every week to kind of navigate stuff, and that is tremendous. Like when it's all said and done,
hitting the Keller, Bradish, Senga trio in those middle rounds, because that's all I really look at, Bubba, is middle round stuff here. That helps a lot. The interesting thing, the Strider Kirby pairing, that's an ideal, like from a team build standpoint, that's so freaking ideal. You're getting your wins and your Ks from Strider. You're not getting many Ks or as many Ks from Kirby, but you're getting elite ratios. And just from building your rotation out, that's super important. That's something I'm looking at in our current draft and hold, where we're starting up tomorrow. Like my first 2 starters are Zach Eflin and Logan Webb. It's kind of this combo, but flipped. I need to very much prioritize strikeouts, and I think that's just from a team build standpoint. You need to look at those categories, not just go off the rankings. And I think with Strider Kirby in this build, it's that's like the ideal way to do it.
Yeah, no, and then I guess it's just like I said, there's 7 pitchers, and you can just kind of fill in the other 2. Once Cole Reagan showed up, there's 8 pitchers. Like he has never had to move anything out of there. And same with the bats, Tucker, Carroll, Will Smith, Wander until that happened. Jeremy Pena to 15. Like he wasn't great this year, but still doesn't kill you. Andrew Vaughn was okay. There's a lot of guys that he pretty much just left in, like especially like the Jaron Duran, Nolan Jones guys. Once they got called up, they were set it and forget it's almost, especially Nolan Jones. So there was a lot of this. Like he managed basically a couple hitters and a couple pitcher spots each week very well. Where it's almost the opposite of my DC teams, where I could barely just field a roster at times. He had very, very strong like starting 7s of pitchers and hitters, and just kind of filled in the rest from there. And that was a pretty maybe like hitters probably more than 7, obviously, but you know what I'm saying. It made it pretty nice luxury that he, like you said, managed the biweekly rosters very, very. Like Brandon Belt, when healthy, was actually a very good hitter, and like to be able to slide him in and out for a half of a week, that's tremendous at certain times throughout the season. If you look at Belt's season, he had a handful of guys like that really probably put him over the top. That's why I would like to see where he was in like August, how his like climb to first happened is what I'm curious of.
Yeah. A couple busts too. So like that's another takeaway. Like you can have a great team and still have some picks that fall flat. Drew Rasmussen comes to mind. I mean, that's not the fault of the pick. He just got hurt. But like Tyler Malley didn't do anything. Garrett Mitchell obviously looked promising, didn't do anything. That was a 19th round, 18th round. Oscar Gonzalez in the 16th round didn't do anything. Jonathan Scope in the 26th, which we're getting deeper, but you want to get something out of that. So there were a few picks where you kind of got nothing. But the takeaway again is to like, you can have injuries, even to some early picks, and still do extremely, extremely well, even in an overall.
Yeah, it's an impressive look. Heck of a job pulling that thing out. That's shows that there's many ways to draft a team, many ways to put it together and see how it works. And it's a team I wouldn't have been cognizant enough to build, but his worked out beautifully for him. So
When so you're thinking
kudos to him.
you're thinking August for standings? See where he was at?
Oh, you're looking it up. Yeah, I'm just kind of curious to like from August to like through the last couple of months how things changed for him. Type scenario.
And,
I'm just curious.
let's see, just some snapshots. So mid August, Striker he had a few teams, but the Farm 2 was 37th overall. In mid July, we'll go All-Star break. He was 8th overall. So had a rough
down to 37th. Huh.
Rough July. September, we'll go mid-September. Our boy was up to 3rd. So had a rough July, but surged after that. Let's look at mid-June.
Yeah, it's some of those back end guys that really caught fire towards the end. That's why I was curious to see how it pushed him.
He was top 10 mid-June.
Plus Cole Reagans. That helps a ton.
This is impressive. He was, 24th mid-May. So he was basically, he never left the top 30. And for a few months did not leave the top 10.
So he's been strong the whole season. I guess it's like you said, getting the top strikeout guy, the top saves guy, one of the best ratio guys. Like you got pitching pretty much on lockdown at that point. And then he got Tucker going, I'm going to still say 30-30. Corbin Carroll with over 50 stolen bases. And, Franco did his thing before his incident, of course. So, he had a great heck of a season. That's a heck of a lineup. And, like, the balance, the more you look at the hitters early, because we talked about the pitching balance, but the hitting balance is pretty impressive too. Because, like, that's why I love guys like Tucker and Carroll, because you can get power and speed like that. That really doesn't, like, negate you a ton. And plus you want 15-team DCs, outfield's even shallower, if that makes sense. So having 2 elite outfielders like that, I think that's tremendous. So I like that a lot.
Bravo. Right, what a team.
Any final thoughts as we wrap up Strikers 2023 championship?
Getting the itch to fail in my own DC. I'm so like I said, we're continuing our meatball draft 8th round. We're picking it back up. I've got the first pick. If you were me, you're in the draft, but you're 15 picks later. Kodai Senga, Lane Thomas, Cole Reagans, or Tariq Skubal.
I've said it since the day the draft ended. If you still need strikeouts, I go Kodai Senga. It's tough. Skubal's great. Reagan's good. I go Senga.
I think I'm going Skubal.
I trust the innings, I guess, more from Senga, but I could be totally wrong.
I mean that's the thing, especially in the DC. You need those. You need those innings. Skubal did get 80.
Skubal's awesome.
Looking today, awesome. He did get 80. So I don't want to say if you double that, but feel confident in like 130. But yeah, Senga blows that out of the water. So
yeah, I don't blame you for that. That's 130 really good innings if he pulls it off. That's really, really good innings. So I'm not going to fault you for that at all.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's tough for you. You're like I said, you're 15 picks away, so you can't really.
15 picks, an 8-hour clock. I get to sit and wait until Saturday probably to take a pick, which is our Sunday even, which is fine. I'm fine. I'm in no hurry, zero hurry to do this. So really curious to see how it plays out because, I got my base package going out there, but we'll see how the whole team plays out. And we will have some time to recap some picks for you guys, probably show to show, just kind of keep you posted on the 3 or 4 picks we make each go around and how the flow is going. And eventually we'll have some ADP out there, not just from ours, because there's other drafts going on. So that'll be exciting as well.
Absolutely. And I think starting up next week, we'll do more reviews, but planning to kind of deep dive each position and just kind of look at what happened, what went wrong, what went right, what that means for 2024. So I'm excited, man.
Yep. It's a great time of the year. It's like we didn't just forget about 2023. We've looked at it and we'll still reference it a ton. It's not going to happen. But as they say, enjoy your wins, enjoy the time, but it's time to move on. So it's 2024. You're doing the forecaster, which gets you looking at 2024, where we'll be pumping along here. And I'm always excited for it. We don't stop. I don't think I've taken a break in God knows how many years. So I keep doing. I might take a breather from doing articles and whatnot, but I'm going to keep doing my shows. That's just what I do because I love doing it. So it keeps it fresh, keeps it fun, and we'll have you guys covered throughout the off season. So I think that was final thoughts. Do you have any other final thoughts, Ryan?
That was it. I have no final thoughts.
No final. All right. With that being said, you can check out Ryan on Twitter at RyanBHQ, the podcast at Bubba Bloom Pod. I am at BD Intric. This was Bubba and the Bloom, episode 77. Catch you guys next time.